Hello everybody and welcome to You Are More Than Enough. So this video I'm going to start it off a little bit different. In order for you to understand the talking points, I need to give a bit of a history / backstory lesson. So as said in the warning, just keep in mind there is going to be talking of contraception methods, IVF or ART methods, birth control, of course pregnancy, and then there's also abortion. So just keep this in mind. If you don't know what any of this is, talk to your parents first and then come back. Okay, so before the 1900s, the idea of having intercourse and not becoming pregnant was something illogical. It was just impossible because intercourse was made to be pregnant. That was until Margaret Sanger came into the picture, and she lived from 1879 to 1966. She was the founder of the American reproductive rights movement. So she was also a very important and promotive figure for the feminist rights movement. In 1914, she published her first feministic issue that was called The Rebel Women. And a quote from this is, "No gods, no masters." She also sold 10,000 copies of the pamphlet Family Limitations. She opened the first birth control clinic in the US. And her core belief, and I quote, "No woman can call herself free who does not own and control her body. No woman can call herself free until she can choose consciously whether she will or will not be a mother." Now, if you doubt that this quote from her is true or anything, there will be a link in the description down below. There's gonna be various articles relating to this. So if you have questions, if you want to know more, find it out for yourself. It's gonna be right there. Her plan to achieve that women would become free was by promoting and using birth control, forced sterilization, and segregation to improve society by keeping unfit people from reproducing. Now, what is she meant by unfit people? To her, unfit people were the disabled, the poor, the sick, and the feeble-minded, which were people with a low IQ or low education. Or in 1950, the American Birth Control League, that is now known as Sanger's Planned Parenthood Federation, started developing oral contraceptives. This was a method of birth control that would stop the, I quote, "wickedness of creating large families," end quote, particularly what she considered to be the undesirable segments of society. What do I mean by undesirable segments of society? Well, she believed that people of color or of other minorities such as Hispanics shouldn't be able to reproduce because they were inferior mentally. And one of her plans by promoting oral contraceptives was to prevent those groups from creating large families, to keep the reproduction numbers of those groups under bay. And in case you want to check it out, there's a link down below for this. Now, Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger made it possible for the first time in history to separate sex from its reproductive consequence. So our culture nowadays has embraced, accepted, and promoted Sanger's and Planned Parenthood's ideology that fertility and pregnancy is something that we are entitled to instead of something that is just natural, that it just happens. Some of the ways you might have heard this, or some of the ways that they promote this ideology, is you have the right to control your body, you have the right to decide when or whether to have a child. If a child isn't wanted or loved, then they shouldn't be born. You are entitled to sexual pleasure and fulfillment without being married or the fear of pregnancy. There's a link for that. That's a direct quote. And the most famous one that you might know, "My body, my choice." There are some people who take birth control for health conditions like They might have extremely irregular periods, extremely painful cramps, more than they actually should be, and they might have other anomalies when it comes to their period and reproduction, which is why some gynecologists, some OBGYN recommend birth control for some women. And in that case, it's totally fine, because usually those birth control pills are a small dose. They don't really do anything bad to you. It's just simply so that it helps you getting a regular period, normal cramps or little pain for cramps, etc., etc. And these are fine. It's a small dosage. It's just to make sure everything is how it should be and to help. Now, there are some birth control methods that don't do that. Some doctors claim they do that, but actually they abort a fertilized egg. And by definition, a fertilized egg is the beginning of life. It's a human being, and it is an egg that has been fertilized by a sperm. It causes for it to abort, zygote, and this brings end to a life that has already begun, and God disapproves of this. Some methods might not abort the baby, but they can reduce your chances of having children if you ever want to. Like, I think it's called IUD, something like that. We're supposed to take it because it's supposed to help you with cramps and a bunch of stuff, blah 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 blah. But in reality, what it does is that it thins a special layer in the uterus that it's needed for a fertilized egg to stick. Because so the egg is fertilized, it goes down, and for it to like implant in the placenta and all that stuff, there's a special layer in the uterus that helps it stick there and grow, and also to protect the uterus itself. So the IUD, I think it's called, what it does, it has the side effect that thins the layer out, minimizing your chances of becoming pregnant and actually increasing chances of you having a miscarriage. And the IUD, it's not made that way by accident. Those side effects are not by accident. It's just stuff that most gynecologists and stuff like that are bought by big pharma won't tell you about, but it essentially does that. Some people think that the emergency pill prevents the sperm from finding the egg, so that way there isn't an actual fertilized egg. It's just simply the sperm doesn't find the egg, but that's not it. The emergency pill, it aborts the fertilized egg by preventing it to stick to the walls of the uterus, essentially a self-induced miscarriage. But what I would recommend for you the most is to study the facts. Don't be ignorant. Yes, we're Christians and we should follow God first and foremost and know all of that, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be alert and knowing what is going on around us. Infertility is another difficult issue, and there has been a variety of assisted reproductive technologies, also known as ART, and some of them have increased a woman's chances of getting pregnant, especially for that of a woman who struggles with it. However, some of them have debatable and questionable moral and ethic issues. Are they successful? Do they actually get a woman pregnant? Yes, but there is some questionable things morally and ethically, and it's been up for debate for many years. One of these is IVF, also known as in vitro fertilization. IVF has helped a lot of women to be able to start families. A lot of couples who just wanted to have kids and have a family. Like, I get that. That's wonderful. The problem is that most doctors, most OBGYNs will recommend you IVF without actually telling you what happens, unless you ask the questions. But if you don't ask the questions, they won't even bother telling you. To explain this better, I took a biology dual credit class, and during that biology credit class, there was a simulation of IVF to understand the reproductive system and blah blah. And you had to do this simulation of fertilizing an egg that was taken out of a woman and stuff like that. Now, during that simulation, it so happened that it wasn't just one egg, it was multiple eggs, and you were supposed to take the first one. This first egg, it had a triple chromosome deformity, something like that. It was a deformity that a baby theoretically would only survive 1 to 2 weeks max. after being born. What they had me do in the simulation is that I had to throw the baby. I had to kill it and throw it to a lab trash can. Problem is with IVF is that when they fertilize the egg, it's not just one child or 5 children. It can be like 6 or 8 children, but sometimes it can be more than 10 children. A lot of children are fertilized. And the problem is that they don't tell you what will happen to the fertilized eggs that are not implanted into the woman in question. Not only that, they don't tell you what they do with the ones that have an anomaly or a deformity or a genetic disorder. So the fertilized eggs that end up being okay but are not implanted, they will either experiment them for the use of science, throw them, kill them and throw away, freeze them in case if the woman wants to have more children, or the woman can decide to put them up to adoption so someone else can have a child. The problem is the fertilized eggs that have those choices, or that people decide those choices for, are only the ones that don't have any anomaly, that are fit to society according to Margaret Sanger philosophy. They are fit for society, they will develop well, etc. But all those that might have Down syndrome or a genetic disorder or a deformity where a limb is missing or something, those children, they won't even tell the mother those numbers. They'll just throw them away. So the numbers that they tell are not always how many eggs were fertilized. I will leave a link in the description regarding this. Either way, still don't just take it for granted off of me, or don't just take everything I tell you. Do your own research, find out the stuff, look it up for yourself, be informed. I will not tell you what to do. I will just tell you what I know. Now that we've talked about generally what all of these things that Margaret Sanger achieved and has influenced, and that we've uncovered that, now the biblical side of it, what does the Bible say about children and reproduction? So first of all, children are a blessing and fulfillment of his commandment to multiply. Genesis 1:28 says, "Then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Now think number 2, children are a gift from God to us. Psalm 127 verse 3 says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb is a reward." Now number 3, children are a way for God to give purpose, meaning, and joy. Psalm 127 verse 4-5 says, "Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is a man who has his quiver full of them. But they shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies to the gate." And Proverbs 23:24 says, "The father of the righteous will greatly rejoice, and he who begets a wise child will delight in him." Number 4 reinstates the points I've just said. Children are from the Lord. Hebrews 2:13 says, "And again, I will put my trust in him, and again, here I am, and the children who God has given me." And then last point is God expects us, because he commanded us to have children and to raise them. Genesis 18:19 says, "For I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, do the righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him." Now Ephesians 6:4 says, "And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in training and admonition of the Lord." Now whether we do or don't have children, that is up to God and not to us, and there are very examples of this in the Bible. So God has more to do with fertility than we give him credit for. So before saying, "Oh no, I control my body, oh no, I don't want to get pregnant," or "I'll just I don't want to get married, I want to get pregnant, I don't want kids, I don't want kids yet," or stuff like that. When you get married, you're like, "I don't want to have kids yet." First, pray to God and seek him out, and try to see it from the perspective that children are a blessing that we should welcome. And so why am I including this site? Well, I've heard from various teenagers or young girls being afraid of the future, and to think that you have to do something, or that you're completely unable to do something at all. This leading to think that maybe it's better not to get married or not to have children at all because of fear. Now, thinking that if one day you become a mother, and it's hypothetical, say one day you become a mother and you think that you cannot influence your children at all, then you're denying your personal responsibility. But let's say hypothetically again, you're a mother, you have a child, thinking it's solely your responsibility will lead you to feel guilty and think that you're at fault if something were to happen or something goes wrong. So the scriptures, the Bible, has accounts of godly parents having ungodly children, godly parents having godly children, godly parents having ungodly children, and ungodly parents having godly children. I'll give you 2 examples of these because there's many examples and I can't go through all of them, but I'll just give you 2 of them for now. Let's start with Lot. He was Abraham's nephew and he's described as a righteous man in 2 Peter 2:7-8. And delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. Now, even though he was a righteous man, the same thing cannot be said about his family. And they do stuff that I can't mention on YouTube. But some of the things I can mention is that Lot's wife, she was unfaithful in the way that when God told him to get out of Sodom and Gomorrah and not turn back, she turned back, and because of her unbelief she turned into a pile of salt. Then there's the daughters, even though they left, they thought it was the end of the world, that there was no one alive in the world, and they did something they shouldn't have done. Then the sons-in-law, they thought he was crazy because the sons-in-law were from Sodom and Gomorrah, so they were just as lawless as the people around him and just as bad as the people around him. So this being called the righteous man of God, his family was messed up. Then there's the priest Eli, who was a judge. It was Eli who received Samuel, and it was Eli who trained Samuel mostly. So you could say Eli raised Samuel. So Eli raised 3 children, his own 2 children, and Samuel. So Samuel, he actually came out godly, and he was the last judge of Israel. He was a godly man who did everything that God told him to. He's one of the greatest prophets in history in the Bible. But the other 2 children he raised, they were completely different. They were supposed to be appointed as the next judges for Israel, but because of how those 2 men were, they decided to appoint Samuel instead. And what verses tells us about this? Well, there is 1 Samuel 2:12, 17, and 22. Now the sons of Eli were corrupt. They did not know the Lord. Therefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. Now Eli was very old, and he heard everything his sons did to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who assembled at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Now this is that the brothers were accused of. They caused Israel a lot of trouble. They committed adultery, but also they did not give due respect to the sacrifice and the offerings of the people to God. There was a certain way that the priests were supposed to give the offering, and only certain things that they were supposed to eat, and in order, like first God and then us. But they decided to steal all the good portions of the offerings and eat them for themselves and desecrate the Lord's offering. This specific sin, the one I'm going to mention, the desecration of the offerings, this sin might have a link to Eli, because Eli, when he dies, it is mentioned that he was heavy. What it means by heavy is that Eli was overweight, and this behavior, this habit, might have contributed to his influenced his sons. And this is mentioned in 1 Samuel 4:18. Then it happened when he made mention of the ark of God that Eli fell off the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died, for the man was old and heavy, and he had judged Israel 40 years. And also God mentions the son's irreverence to Eli, because God reprimands Eli for not instructing his 2 sons in his way, since they were supposed to when they become priests and judges. He reprimands Eli because of this great sin in 1 Samuel 2:29. Why do you kick at my sacrifice and my offering which I have commanded in my dwelling place? And honor your sons more than me, to make yourselves fat with the best of all the offerings of Israel my people? Ezekiel 18:19-20. Yet you say, why should the son not bear the guilt of the father? Because the son has done what is lawful and right, and has kept all my statutes and observed them, he shall surely live. The soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father bear the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. Now, when it comes to spiritual connection or a child's spiritual lives and a parent's spiritual lives, there isn't always a direct correlation between the two. But just because there isn't a direct correlation between a child and their parent doesn't mean you can't influence them to have a spiritual life or a spiritual connection with God, which means your influence will be significant to an extent. All you have to do when you grow up and you're an adult and you get married and want to have children is decide basically what set of boundaries you're gonna set for those children, and in what age are you gonna set new boundaries or take other ones and stuff like that. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that each generation is responsible for their own walk and obedience, regardless of what the parents do or don't do. So your responsibility is to set up boundaries in order to guide them and teach them in the ways of the Lord, because we are to instruct them, we are to teach them in God, and try to influence them to have a relationship with God. We can't force it, we can only influence it, but that's the responsibility we'll have. Now that doesn't mean that everything that they do will bear weight on us, because we will all give individual accountability to God of what we did. So once your children are adults and stuff like that, whatever they do and they choose, that's up with them and God, not you and God. So what you do is up with you and God. Just do your responsibility, but what they do is up with them and God. Because remember, God is not going to judge your situation and circumstance or your emotions. He's going to judge the actions you take and the choices you make. That's what he's going to judge. Deuteronomy 24:16 says, fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor shall children be put to death for their fathers. A person shall be put to death for his own sin. Jeremiah 31:29-30 says, in those days they shall say no more, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. But every one shall die for his own iniquity. Every man who eats the sour grapes, his teeth shall be on edge. So this is that all you would be able to do is to teach them and guide them. So don't be anxious of one day growing up and not wanting to get married because you don't know if you would be a good parent. Like, you don't know if you would be a good mother. We all have our flaws, we're human, but don't let that be an excuse to not have children when you can. Just do your best. And before I close this video, since we're talking about children, there's something I would like to say. Now, I'm not being promoted, I'm not being sponsored to say this or anything, like, at all. I'm just saying this because I want to say it and I think I should say it. I want to encourage you all who are watching to go and watch The Sound of Freedom, and I can tell you it will break your heart. It will make you angry and it will break your heart. I cried the first 10 minutes into the movie, and I kept crying the entire movie. It broke my heart to see, but I had to see it. It was based off true events, and this is a movie Christians need to see because, like the movie says, God's children are not for sale, and every Christian should see this. And Elon Musk, he announced that once the movie, is out of theaters, that it's no longer projecting, he will buy the movie or do something, I think a collaboration, so that people on Twitter can watch it for free. Not only that, if you watch the movie, there's a barcode in the end. You can buy tickets for someone else who you think should watch this movie, but please go watch The Sound of Freedom. I'm not being sponsored or paid to say this at all. Another movie you should watch alongside with it is a movie called Nefarious. It's based off a book called The Nefarious Plot. This movie, it's good to watch. It's revealing, it's eye-opening. It's not heartbreaking, but it's revealing and eye-opening. And Christians should also see this because it allows us to know what's really going on spiritually in the world. You do have to have a strong stomach for it though, but it's an Amazon Prime. You can buy it or you can rent it, but watch those 2 movies because people need to be aware. Again, as I'm saying, I am not being paid or sponsored to say anything about this. I just, as Christians, we should watch these movies to be aware of what's going on. Anyway, if you liked the video, leave a thumbs up. If you didn't, you can dislike or just don't do anything at all. You can subscribe, unsubscribe, or simply not subscribe. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. I will have links in the description for information in case you would like to know about anything or about the stuff I said. Share with whoever you think might need it. And yeah, see you next time. Bye. But after this short break, why are you guys always so gloomy? What are you doing, Mama? Huh? Buy an that I bought. Nomad commanded. We messed up. She was it influenced